Hello everybody, welcome to my advanced guide for dealing with the harder bosses in M+ for Season 3. I know a lot of you guys have been struggling with some of these bosses on Tyrannical Weeks, and hopefully this video will help. So, starting off with our Spain Triad, this is generally where I want my first Bloodlust. The most common mistake I've seen is people not interrupting the right targets. The way it works is, the main target with the Iris, which is Selena in this situation, will only cast on the tank. The other two witches will always be casting on the other 4 members in your party. And generally, the DPS and the healer are the one in trouble in this boss fight, which means you will usually be wanting to use your interrupts on the off targets. You can see here, we go into the fight, and I like to drag Selena closer to Briar right away. That way, when you interrupt Briar, Briar will not melee the closest target. You can see here I use my interrupt on Briar. And another common mistake too is, whenever you're interrupting these off targets will melee, but because they don't move, they will always melee the closest target since they can't reach their aggro target. So if someone was standing next to Malady here and you interrupt Malady, Malady will melee and kill that person, and that's why I would like to tank Selena next to Briar. Once we push Selena, I move Malady over to the stack of the witches. The next important thing is unstable marks. Unstable runic mark is the main mechanic you'll be wanting to use defensives and healing cooldowns on. You'll want to be rotating through party CDs like Darkness, whatever healer CDs you have available, and just personal CDs. The only other important thing is Briar. Jagged Nettle is a physical attack and can be immune with things like Blessing of Protection. In this case, we use Neverwalk here from Junkrat. And it can be removed with augmentations called Rising Flame. That's something I haven't been seeing augmentations using enough in Pugs. But that's really all there is to this fight. Soulbound Goliath. This will be the true wall of Waycrest Manors. Everyone's been struggling on this boss, and this boss is the hardest boss in this dungeon. One of the hardest bosses in M+ at the moment, actually. So the key to defeating this boss is very dumb, but necessary. Requires using a PvP trinket, the medallion trinket that removes CC on a 2-minute cooldown. This can be acquired from the auction house or from farming some PvP honor, and you can spend that over at the training dummy area in Valdraken. So this is where we want our second lust. We cleared out trash until around 11-minute mark. Then we had all our DPS zone out to equip the medallion. You can use your plus 20 dungeon port to zone out, or you could just like die to a fire and walk out of the dungeon to swap your trinkets. So we had our guys swap out. Weed Smoke is coming back. And when you start the fight, there's one thing you can do with these thorns. You can actually pre-immune them. You can see here, Soul Thorns is coming up. And right as the cast is about to finish, we have Weed Smoke using Breath of Eons, and Junkrat uses his meta immune here. Unfortunately, it goes on Ventor. It's completely RNG who it goes on, but there is a chance that you immune it off, allowing you to save damage and not have to hit the thorns. And as you can see, Ventor just pops his trinket and gets rid of the thorns right away. So as for when to clear the boss stacks, you will want to get the boss to about between 15 and 25 stacks before you start looking for a fire. Every single tank should have enough defensive CDs to get to that point. You should always try to have at least one backup CD in case of a bad fire. So at this point, you're going to want to start looking around the room for fires. You want to look for fresh fires ideally. You don't want to just go into a fire that is going to disappear as you're dragging the boss in. And you're also only going to want to clear after a thorns. You can see here I kind of run out of CDs and I'm starting to look for a fire. We get Junkrat out of the thorns. There's a fresh fire right here. Boom, get him in. This is where you want to be using your CDs. We had a Darkness, a bunch of personal defensives. Then reposition back to roughly where the boss spawns. So you just want to rinse repeat this the entire time. Get to about 20 stacks, then you want to start looking for new fires. Soul Thorns is coming up, so you're going to want to kill at least one more Soul Thorns, and I should be able to hold out for at least one more Soul Thorns. Yeah, so we break Ventor out here. And then after we break him out is when we want to bring him into a fire. But that's about it. As long as you are clearing at a proper time, as long as your team is attempting to immune the thorns and using PvP trinkets, those will be the best solutions to defeating this boss. Alright, Lord and Lady Waycrest. So a couple of things that people don't know. One is that you can interrupt Lady Waycrest with a range interrupt, like a hunter interrupt in this case. That'll prevent a good bit of group damage. The second thing is, when she does the swirlies that come out of the piano, they will only target the closest 2 or 3 targets in your party. That means if you want to prevent the swirlies, you can have your casters standing in the back so they can free cast. You can see these swirlies here, they're going on the closest 3 targets here. And these guys over here in the back, they can just free cast. It's super useful for the healer if the healer is struggling to heal this fight. One other thing is, Mortal Strike effects are really big on this boss fight. It actually reduces the amount of healing Lord Waycrest receives. It's actually just more damage than almost any other ability you can have in the game. Demon Hunters have a talent called Mortal Dance they can spec into that makes Lord Waycrest receive 50% less healing. So those are a couple of tips that'll help a lot with this fight. It's not too hard of a fight, but some people will struggle with this fight. This is also a very good usage of your third Bloodlust. By Bloodlusting this boss, you can quickly get Lady Waycrest down, and once she's down, you can just rotate interrupts on her and there's pretty much no more group damage. So it's really just the first 2 phases of Lord Waycrest that are challenging. We're kind of trolling here, we're fighting it in the corner, which makes all the swirlies go on our casters, but you can kind of see there are no swirlies here on our melee at all. But it should usually be the opposite, where you have the boss and the melees dodging the swirlies and the casters back here. Okay, Yasma, this fight breaks many Atal desires. Atals are all about, you do the key, you have infinite time left, and you get to the last boss and you wipe 10 times. So the key here is to maintain a stack. You have to be stacking and moving at all times. So the first bait we could drop in the middle, it's not a big deal. This should be killed pretty quickly. And then you're going to want to move in one direction, whether it's clockwise or in our situation anti-clockwise. And you just want to bait these echoes of Shadra in this general location. Whenever they grow big and they start to glow like this, that's when they're moving. They fixate on a specific player and you can have them all baited into this corner, and they'll go small again and rinse repeat. So you see we maintain this stack, they grow big, we bait them in, Echo of Shadra soon, or Soul Rend. It's RNG which spell gets queued first. Generally with Soul Rend I would prefer if it's baited ahead, but back here is not too big of a deal too. It just makes it a little bit cramped. And we have Echo of Shadra. The idea is, as a tank, you're going to want to move every time they grow big. You want to let them walk in a bit. So they're going to grow big here, walk in a bit, then move. And we're going to grow again soon. Then you move. As for defensive usages, if you're not going to get one shot by the Soul Rend or the Racking Pain, which only happens in extremely high keys by the way, like this is a 26 and it still doesn't one shot us, you ideally want to be using your defensive only for Racking Pain plus the Soul Rend, because the Racking Pain leaves a dot. There will be an overlap at some point. But yeah, as you can see here, we're baiting the movement. They grow big, we move. Echo of Shadra, we move again. And this might be an overlap here. Yeah, so like this one's an overlap. Weed uses his defensive here. Oh, it's not a hard overlap, it's a soft overlap. So yeah, ideally ads are baited ahead and you move as a group with the spiders. At some point into the fight, you'll have a ton of spiders, but because they're all well stacked, you shouldn't run into any issues. Alright, Ancient Protectors. So this fight is one of the tougher ones. You're gonna want to have a Bloodlust here. We opted for first Bloodlust on this poll, but you can also have your second Bloodlust going into this if you follow the normal pathing going into Wiverbark. So on this fight, we actually have a really good comp for it. Warlocks can have Curse of Tongues, or an amplified version of it if they spec into amplified curses, making their cast significantly longer because the boss has no lockout. So there's really not a whole lot to this, just rotating interrupts. Ideally, you're interrupting as late as possible. As you can see here with the amplified curse, it's a 6-second cast. We do interrupt a little bit early here, but it happens. This is mostly a group of friends playing, not some super hardcore group. For these charge puddles, you're going to want the range to be stacking and moving at all times. This will help a lot. The melee too, ideally you want the melee to be out whenever the charge happens, and you're not covering up Telu here because you're going to want to be killing Telu first. For the tanking the boss, you want to maintain as much uptime and mitigation as possible and move out last second for the charge. But that's really all there is to it. Make sure you have one important interrupt on Telu and one important interrupt on Gola. You're going to want to stick on Telu until you have some interrupts available. Then you can go over to the other side with the charge for some interrupts. You can see here we're tossing out some interrupts over there. Try to get an interrupt here. Oh, and it switches. But you're just gonna want to hard burn Telu. After you burn Telu, the fight becomes significantly easier since you won't have one of the mobs doing their AoE cast anymore. This torrential fury here. Alright, Archmage Soul. This boss will be hard to bloodlust because of bloodlust timings, but if you can somehow find a route where you can bloodlust both this boss and Council, that's probably a good idea. Going into this fight, she will always do fire right away, and fire means death. That means you'll generally want to have defensives right off the bat. Our group does have a bunch of small defensives right away. The healer is going to want to pre-ramp before you pull this boss, so you should never pull this boss ASAP. You're going to want to do like a little bit of a pull timer or something to get your group mentally prepared to perish within the first 3 seconds. So the way this boss works is it'll always do danger, danger, safe. That's the order of her abilities. So this is like the first set of danger. Then there'll be another set of danger coming up, which is Cinderbolt plus Glacial. And then after that is safe. So you basically want to space out your defensives and group CDs in a way so that you're covering the 2 danger parts and you have that little downtime for cooldowns to come back up. On this fight, you're also going to want one person baiting out and everyone else in melee. You can see over here we have the 4 stack here with our Warlock sitting out. Ideally, the person staying out is either the healer or the tankiest person, and in this case we have our Warlock staying out. What this does is it makes the suck orb, the spatial compression, have a ton of travel time, allowing the team to react. You can see here everyone has plenty of time to get out, and then the suck happens. So that was a safe one, right? Then there's gonna be another danger up ahead. The way it works out, you'll generally have about a minute between the first danger set and the second danger set. So here we have a darkness, and then there's gonna be one more danger, then it'll be safe. And basically you just want to have CDs planned out for all the danger parts. So once again, danger, danger, safe, danger, danger, safe. Have one person tanky stand out, everyone else stack up in melee. That's about it. Okay, Yondu. This guy is actually deceptively hard, especially on a higher key level. This boss is insane. It takes really long and it's really difficult. So there's not a whole lot to this, but I will say the most common mistakes I've seen are people not pulling damage for the ad and misusing cooldowns. So in this situation, Horseboy used a blur here, and there's no ad out. You do not want to be using defensives here. Like Chun used his dark back too. You ideally want to be holding on to defensives until this ad here comes out. When this ad is out, there will be a very deadly overlap of ad damage plus colossal blow, as you can see here. So here's like a little bit of better defensive usage. We have a desperate prayer plus scales here, and when the blow is coming out, boom, we have the blow happening plus the ad rotting us down. But really the fight is just having defensives rotated for the ad and just having as much damage pooled up for the ad as possible. Alright, Shade of Xavius. So there's one important thing to know about this fight. The rest are pretty self-explanatory. At 50% when the boss does Apocalyptic Nightmare, he'll do a new mechanic where he starts shooting out swirlies all around the map. You'll see here in a second. So these swirlies, whenever they touch the boss actually gains a 5% damage increase. A lot of people are actually unaware of this. But if you tank it in this corner here, there actually aren't really spawns here. There are only spawns that are baited on players like Junkrat. So there's one beta on Junkrat. The boss gets one stack, you can see here, for 9 seconds left. But as long as you tank it in this corner here and the range are out baiting the swirlies, you'll generally avoid most of the stacks. This will make the last half of Xavius significantly easier. As you can see here, we're already 30% and the boss has only gotten 1 stack, or maybe it was like 2 stacks. Alright, time wait. I've seen so many people do this fight wrong. So starting with the fragment of time mechanic, which will happen in a couple of seconds. The first thing is you usually want to be dodging right. As long as you're moving anti-clockwise around the move, you will always be able to safely avoid these balls. Ideally, you're moving quick. You just want to be quickly moving around. So when the debuffs come out, this is the mechanic people are not doing properly. You want everyone to be starting on dark. You want everyone in dark, then one person standing still in light and getting dispelled. As long as that person stands still, you can dispel him. You can see here, Ventor dips really low, but because he's standing still and we dispel him, he takes 0 damage from his own dispel. The other person with the debuff has to be very worried about their life. And once you get dispelled, everyone should go back into dark. Standing in dark makes you take 20% less damage. So you can see here, Weed stood still and got dispelled. Because he was standing still, he took 0 damage. You're only gonna need to top the person with the debuff and make sure everyone is healthy enough to survive the spell. I also have this weak over here that I was working on, where if the person is standing still with the debuff, it'll glow their frames. You can see here, Weed is standing still, his frames are glowing, and it'll tell you the perfect time to be dispelling them. Also, ideally, you're always dispelling the squishier person in your party first. So in this situation, we're ideally dispelling Growl or Ventor, or Weed if Weed doesn't have the scales up. You can also pre-immune. You can see here, Ventor used his turtle before the debuffs came out. It's RNG, but if you are able to pre-immune it, that means you'll only have 1 debuff to deal with. You can also pre-meta, you can pre-cloak, pre-bubble, etc. So once again, Junkrat is still, he got dispelled. Ideally, don't dispel the Demon Hunter first, but that was the call that was made. And then you immediately get back into dark. Growl stands still afterwards. But because Ventor didn't get topped in time, he does die. But that's pretty much all there is to this fight. Always move anti-clockwise. Make sure to stand still in the light if you have the debuff. And everyone else, the 4 party members, should always be in dark. Blight of Galakrond. This fight, a lot of people fail in pugs. It's kind of a messy fight and there's a lot of chaos going on. For the first part of the fight, there's really not too much to it. It's just take the debuff, get reclaimed, get to 80%, and then this is when the fight gets really hectic. So if you have a Feign Death in your group, Vanish, Invis, you can see over there, you can completely negate this mechanic, making the fight significantly easier. So it's highly recommended to have Night Elf in this fight if you can. Make sure you use your Vanish just for removing that, or Mage Invis, Feign Death, those types of mechanics. When you are dealing with this mechanic though, ideally you have the person sitting on the debuff all the way up until this part of the fight. So say it went on Junkrat, ideally Junkrat sits on the debuff with Blur up until around this part, then he should be passing it to the tank. And if you do that, you'll only need to pass once for the Blight Reclamation. This is one of the harder parts of the fight, phase 2. If you have Bloodlust, this would also be a good time to be using Lust. Now for phase 3. Phase 3, if you can get the Feign Deaths or the Vanishes, etc. on this, it's actually massive. Ventor didn't have Feign Death here since he used... Oh, actually, no, he did have it. Yeah, so you can see here, like, we feigned off the mechanic, and now it's just a complete joke. So one important thing to make this fight not as messy, let's go back a little bit, is to have everyone baiting towards the middle. Right here, these guys are positioned poorly, but they still have 7 seconds for this incinerating Blight Breath. Since this mob, Dazcac, only moves whenever it's doing incinerating Blight Breath, which is baited on a DPS. So here I call for Junkrat to bait towards the middle. You can see here he finishes I-beam, walks over, boom, beautiful. Baited on Junkrat. Now the boss moves to the center instead of being all huddled up in this corner here. And we just stack and move accordingly with the group. I like to stay on the outer edge, since usually I'll have a debuff here. And then everyone else stands towards the middle. Now when this mechanic happens, this root could be removed with either freedoms, disengages, or you can actually CC off these Necrofrost with disorient type CCs. So like Fear, Freezing Trap, probably Disorienting Roar, probably Paralysis. I'm not too sure what else CCs work on it, but you could remove these instantly, making it significantly easier. Here we use a Fear Sigil, boom, it's gone. Growl can also use his Psychic Scream. And here's another bait towards the middle. Now it's super clean, not as chaotic, and this third phase is actually pretty simple as long as you're playing it properly. Okay, this guy, or Dicron. There's not a whole lot to him, but there are a couple of things that people don't really do properly. So one is, the boss can actually parry. It's probably because this guy will end up being a raid boss next patch or something, next expansion. But because the boss can parry, you're gonna want to be positioning the boss in a way so that your melees aren't getting parried, as you can see here in a second. Another important thing too is, on this boss fight, oh you can see, oh yeah, so I flip the boss around right before Earth Surge happens. I'm just tanking him here, and now the boss has shielded and is standing still, you can just have full uptime on the boss without getting parried. But yeah, so ideally you're not using cooldowns on the shield unless you have to. If you have to break the shield fast for your healer, you can, but ideally you're using your damage cooldowns. Like here we have Ventor's 2-minute CD here, and Meta, we're just holding it for after we break the shield. This is also that we can skip one of the shields. The boss phases at 90%, and if we can put in as much damage as possible into the actual boss health, that means we have a chance of skipping the shield, or skipping a shield. If you can't skip a shield, then it's kind of whatever, then you can just send CDs on CD. But that's really all there is to it, so just a couple of important things. Turn the boss so that it doesn't parry your melees, and try to use damage on the boss's actual health instead of the shield, unless you're not going to skip a shield. Alright, so tier. This boss is actually one of the bosses that people really don't do properly. So once you pull the boss, and at the start of every phase, he will always do Spark of Tear first, which is the Dispel. You're going to want this dispelled ASAP, and ideally you prioritize the squishier player. So the spells come out, boom, That was a good dispel on himself of healer. And from here, he will do one of 3 different abilities at random. There are 2 frontals and the divide. The Titanic Blow is the frontal on the tank. You just want to be facing it to the outer edge. You also want to be tanking this guy at the outer perimeter of the circle the entire time. Or he'll do Infinite Annihilation, which is aimed at the DPS or healer. So this is why we have everyone positioned over here. Or in the worst case scenario, it would be Dividing Strikes. Dividing Strikes as the first ability is the worst because we have a debuff out and we are needing to top off everyone from the initial debuff. So in the case of Dividing Strikes, you will only want 2 people soaking if you can. That's assuming you have an immunity in your group. It'll be the tank plus we have Horseboy use Neverwalk here. You only need 2 players to be soaking to deal with this mechanic. But obviously, if you don't have a person that has an immunity or a massive defensive to soak this, you're gonna want everyone else to soak. So the general convention for my group would be the 4 players stand in front of the boss and the 1 person with the circle stand behind the boss and use a major defensive. But that's only if you don't have an immunity. If you do have an immunity and it is Dividing Strikes plus there's a debuff out, you want the tank plus the person with the immunity soaking. So you can see here we soak pretty safely. It's just me with Brandon, Meta, and Horseboy with an immunity. And then now you can just freely dispel whenever, since we haven't taken any group damage. So beautiful bait there with the Annihilation. Now the boss will be doing 2 more abilities, as you can see from his energy. It's 25 energy per attack. So Titanic Blow, I baited against the old crap on the ground. Then 1 more bait here, Infinite Annihilation. This is baited at the players. So bad positioning from our group, but ideally they're standing over here and baiting it outside. So now we've covered up the middle part, which is not great, but we can make it happen still. So when the boss is at 25 energy, it'll do 1 more attack. If that was the final attack, you're going to want to start dragging the boss towards the middle. So once again, at 25 energy, look towards going to the middle. This way, the melee can maintain full uptime. We position our melee next to Tier so that he can attack the boss while collecting the orbs coming in. I basically play goalie here, and I'm only taking whatever orbs happen to come into this painted area here. You can also extend your buff. You can see here, I grabbed one of the orbs. Ideally, you have your DPS extending their buffs. Then we go right back into Spark of Tear again. Instant Dispel. Boom. Baits. Ideally, everyone's baiting here. That was a bit of a bad positioning from Chun. Fronto here. I'm posting outside. So we didn't get Dividing Strikes in this case. Us not getting Dividing Strikes here is the best case scenario. That means we have time to top off everyone, get a Dispel off before the next Dividing Strikes. So here, another bait on the outer perimeter. Then comes Dividing Strikes. And then 25 energy, 1 more bait. So I'm positioning towards the middle, 1 more bait, and I'm gone. Now we're back to the middle. Melees attack the boss while collecting orbs. Everyone else positioned to the opposite side. But Chun got a little bit boxed in here, so he's also fighting for the orbs with Horseboy. But ideally, we didn't have this bait here initially. But yeah, that's the entire fight. Back to dispels, bait outside, move the boss to the middle whenever the boss is 25 energy. And once again, if you do have an immunity, 2 people deal with the Dividing Strikes if there's an overlap with the dispel. Otherwise, just soak it. Okay, Time Lost Battlefield. This is actually one of the more unintuitive fights that people don't do properly. So this fight is where we want to be using our 3rd Bloodlust. We pathed towards Morchi first so that we can have Bloodlust back for this boss. And we've been Bloodlusting off cooldown for the most part. So right away, you're going to want to take the boss towards the center, but not directly in the center. The best way to understand this fight is there are two sides. You can split the room in half. There's this side where we are located. That's where the boss spawned. That'll be where most of the boss mobs are. Then there's the opposite side, in this case the horde side. You will want to be facing the enemy side at all times. See how we have everyone baiting on this side. Also, before Mortal Strikes, make sure the tank is topped and has a defensive ready, because if you are not topped, you will take a ton of damage and it'll be very hard to recover from. So here, the shockwaves we are baiting. I have these two markers down, Skull and Moon. These are like the spots you ideally want to be baiting on, or like just like roughly in this area. And as long as you're baiting these shockwaves properly, the boss won't be getting stacks. Boss did get one stack here, but one stack is fine. You can see the boss has 2 stacks total. As long as you're not baiting along this side. If you're baiting anywhere on this side, it will cause the boss to get a lot of stacks. And as long as you're tanking it close to the center-ish, you'll be able to quickly take out the enemy mobs whenever they spawn, especially the archer. The archer has to be taken out quick. So that's really all there is to this fight. As long as you're positioning the boss somewhat close to the center, baiting the shockwaves properly, staying topped for the mortal strikes, and focusing down the archers. Also, interrupting the caster is pretty important for reducing tank damage. Alright, Lady Najar. So there's one really important thing to know about this fight, and it's about the Focus Tempest mechanic, which is like really the only important mechanic. This mechanic will target one of the 4 non-tank members in the party. It can only target the same person one time, and it hits them once, then it bounces to the closest target. You can see here, it hits Growl, then it bounces to me, then it hits Ventor and it bounces to me, and then it hits Junkrat and bounces to me. It can never target Growl twice, or Ventor twice, or Junkrat twice. And we have this formation where we have a little bit of a square around the boss, with me standing in the center, so that it will always jump to me. If you do it like this, it becomes extremely easy. Even though you see us dipping dangerously low, we're never in any danger of dying because we've already been targeted once and it can no longer hit us again, as long as you have this formation. So as long as you have enough to survive the Focus Tempest, you'll never die to this fight. 2 melee interrupts on the water bolts, then shock blast. This will be the only mechanic where you really have to press something big. You see here, Ventor uses turtle, and then alright, it's a little bit messy here. Okay, so that was messy. I think it hit Ventor and it jumped on Weed, or the other way around. Ideally, we got back into formation quick enough to the point where it would just be like one person, then bounce the tank, one person bounce the tank. Rinse, repeat. So look at it one more time here. Shock blast on Growl. Gets back into position soon. It hits Junkrat, but it bounces to me. Then that was Ventor, and it bounced to me. And finally, Weed, then it bounced to me. As long as you do this, this boss fight will be pretty easy. A lot of these strats aren't necessarily required, but will help a lot for those pushing hard keys. I've noticed a lot of keys this season do require a good level of coordination, and will probably require team comms. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this longer form video. Hopefully it helped, and if it did, I can continue with these types of videos.